we have some questions, hopefully. It's been fascinating to compare experiences across different emerging markets. And I suspect the panel probably have a lot of questions for each other. But do we have any questions from the audience, please? First one here. We have a microphone. If you could use a microphone, because it will enable everybody to hear on the live stream as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for all the knowledge that we received from different continents. I have a question for Ian around China, and my question is: you mentioned the pensions products as a potential opportunity in China. When you said that life, health, and pensions are being sourced, especially from Hong Kong and Singapore, into China. I was wondering, why is that the case? And specifically into pensions, is that individual pensions or corporate pensions, or both, that you see as a potential product there?
The feeling is that the Chinese insurers have always focused more on wealth products, so investment products. But they do not have, up to now, and that's the general feeling professionally, but also in the Chinese wealthier community, they don't have the sophistication and the reliability for long-term care products. And they have never invested in the know-how, while HSBC and banks through their and insurers in Hong Kong have these products already for a much longer time. And they also have arrangements that you can go to the better hospitals. And this know-how is very much wanted. So it's a matter of professionality, maybe experience, but also trustworthiness in the foreign insurance products in this field. So China is very volatile. There's been a lot of investment frauds. Some insurance schemes have collapsed. The risks have been too high, while on the other hand, the assets were not able to perform sufficiently. So there is not enough trust in order to make this market grow very fast, while the insurers in the UK and the products in Hong Kong and the products are more sophisticated and perceived as more reliable. So that's the reason. And now it's a possibility from Hong Kong to offer these products in sales channels in China, and they are very, very much wanted. So if you go to the local branches of the foreign firms, you see a lot of richer Chinese exploring opportunities, trying to buy a long-term insurance product. And this is a booming market. It's really booming. It's, I think, year on year, maybe 30-40% increase.
Okay. Another question here.
I echo my colleague and thank you all very much for all the presentations. My question is for Zhao, and it relates to, well, you mentioned important changes in the Brazilian market, all seem to be very positive. My question is more from a political side. Sometimes you also said that there is a white and a black, and very little in the middle in terms of the political power. And I wonder whether all of these regulations that seems to be very market friendly or investor friendly are at risk if there is any change in government in next elections, or whether these regulations are quite secure in some, well, in your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Santiago. Coming from a colleague from Argentina,
Yes.
I
have a personal interest in that question.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's true. I have to say that some rules that Argentina issued about reinsurers were definitely inspired in the worst rules we issued in Brazil. We have issued before in Brazil, but Argentina made the job to correct the rules before us. So after that, we went back to the previous environment. So it may be confusing, and obviously the consistency is necessary here. I don't see a big chance of steps back on this process because we need them. So the pension reform is not something that is only the agenda of the Bolsonaro or the right, the liberal government that exists now, at least in the economic side. It's necessary. Lula tried that too. They suggest that it's a project to reduce the money of the poor population, but they try to do the same, and so it's necessary. The state, the amount of money that we have to pay to the state, how the state, the government is big, is not anymore a political discussion. Now it's a management decision that we don't have option. The government doesn't have money to invest in anything more. So because of that, we have to solve the problems. Obviously, there's a lot of focus from this government on solving these problems. And as you know, it's good to solve them fastly, because if you don't do that, they start to say that we are guilty for the problem, and we are not. This new government. So I think it's difficult to step back because things will work. We had years of recession, so it's easy to have economic growth. We just have to go back to 2014. It's not a big challenge, and we are going to do that. If we do that, as it was said in the North American election, it's the economy. If the economy goes well, I think. But obviously, we are not. We have to take care of this process, to pay attention very carefully to what's happening. I trust we are not going to step back, but it's possible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a question from the live stream. Anissa.
Yes, Aldo, I have a question for you that's come in from Finland. The question is as follows. We have understood that anti-money laundering documents have to be approved by the insurer physically at the client's premises. The client in this case being the local subsidiary of a foreign global company and being insured by a local insurer within a global insurance program. If we have correct information, we wonder how long this type of process will last, delay substantially the issuance of a local policy.
The first part of the question was if the insurer has to.
So it's whether documents have to be approved by the insurer physically at the client's premises.
That's not that accurate. The insurer has to receive on its satisfaction all the documentation from the insured. And it doesn't have to happen in the insured premises. However, yes, it is now a problem that we are having in Mexico, that all the information and documentation that has to flow from the insured to the insured is wide. And the thing is that the insurer and any other participant in the financial system in Mexico has to comply with a lot of things that prevents from the money laundering, and the insurer must be sure that of the existence of the insured and the legal existence of the insured and the legal source of the funds that are going to be transferred to the insurer, or if the insurer is going to pay for an indemnification because of an insurance being triggered by a claim, the insurance company must have certainty that the destiny of the funds are legal.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have
Another question for Aldo. You said that Mexico is quite open to foreign investors in terms of insurance business, but what are still sort of the main obstacles in your opinion? And sort of how is the government tackling those?
I think that nowadays the obstacles are good because the obstacles tend to be sure that the coming capitals are clean. So we are putting a high barrier to avoid money laundering systems to get into the insurance sector in Mexico.
Okay. Alberto.
Hi. I was wondering about what's the state of the art in blockchain and smart contracts in your insurance industries in respective countries.
This is the doubt of my colleagues. We are not using the blockchain, not yet. But we have some initiatives from SUSEP already. They have a system to exchange information with the central bank and the Securities Exchange Authority, and it's already based on blockchain. IFB became partner of the big blockchain company together with Munich and Swiss Re and other global groups. Our insurance companies, not talking about large risks necessarily, but talking about personal lines, we usually linked, the most important ones are linked to banks, and banks in Brazil are very sophisticated. So we can hope that easily, when it's possible, they are going to apply that. So in the regulation, we have some problems. We still have some problems, but there is an intention to solve them. So I would say that we don't have a lot of blockchain being used. Some specific initiatives regarding claims handling, to small claims. They are starting to use that in the automobile insurance, but the perspectives are good.
In India, as you know, we've got this unified digital identification system that's been implemented. So all Indians have what we call as an Aadhaar card with a number. I know Bajaj Allianz is testing in a significant way personal lines on the motor side with blockchain. So both with policy issuance as well as claims handling. It's not mandated by regulation in any way. My expectation is that as the sandbox sort of comes into its own, we're going to see more and more products with blockchain coming in, and in particular when it comes to trading.
With respect to China, I've mentioned it in one of the sheets. Artificial intelligence and blockchain is well advanced. At the same time, regulations are behind. So these e-commerce platforms and then join forces with the insurance firms, they are experimenting enormously, and I believe, but I'm not completely sure, that they put it already into practice in order to reach the consumers, but also to make calculations and otherwise. Another thing that is moving very fastly is face recognition in order to determine whether a person will have, on the basis of a certain age, the size of his skin, whether he's man or woman, and his profession. On that basis, they are already able to give you a premium quotation. So these kind of developments go very fast, but at the same time, there is laxation in the whole regulatory process. So they are behind. I'm not sure whether they do it on purpose or not. I think the regulators are just not sophisticated enough in order to intervene and to already make rules to the extent they want to. But they are part of the whole development and the innovation for sure.
Well, I'm gonna split this answer into two main topics. The answer would be no if we are using the blockchain. No, not yet. I think that we might be understanding how the blockchain works for fintech purposes, but not for insurtech purposes. If we are speaking about using digital platforms such as biometrics and that kind of technology, yes, we are using it, and we are now trying to use, as I said, biometrics instead of the signature. That would be it.
Thank you. I have a question for Saku, thanks. Which really follows up from a meeting in Shanghai and hearing about the Chinese legal system. I was just wondering, what is your view about the legal system in India, its operation, whether it's effective, and our claims being paid?
I think it's take the history and come down that way. Every person who's dealt with India basically says a claim is made and the claim is paid in the next generation. That is fortunately changing, and it's changing because of two reasons. The first is a mindset of the claims handler themselves, that they believe, and the more and more I talk to people, the more and more claims handlers are saying that we'd only be able to deepen our growth in the market as well as increase market share if we pay out claims. So there is less contentious sort of positions being taken and less technical positions being taken by insurers. When claims do go into litigation, the three sort of different areas where you can raise claims. The first is the consumer forum. Like I said, the judges don't understand what they're doing. So if it's personal lines, simple claims, that is the way one would go. If it's more complex claims, I mean, we have been involved with one just now for a power plant. The judge is really not understanding anything. The client filed with the consumer forum and it didn't start arbitration. With the change in the Arbitration Act in the last 2 years, there's accelerated arbitration. What we are proposing now is to do an arbitration in 6 months basis document. So essentially, sole arbitrator, documents get submitted, award comes out. I mean, if they're not complex and everything is documented, for example, when you talk about cyber liability as an example, when you don't need expert witnesses at times. If it's very complex, it's a different matter. When you talk about E&O, for example, we've seen a couple of those claims go into accelerated arbitration. But anywhere where you require detailed witness and expert evidence, you still go down to arbitration, 2 years, or you do foreign seated arbitration, which is significantly better. I mean, Indian courts are now not interfering with awards passed outside of India. We've seen that happen over and over again now.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Or any questions from the panel to the audience? John.
Just touching on emerging insurance markets, with a new view in global insurance providers and reinsurers of piety in not insuring what they call dirty industries, mining and certain extraction industries. Do you think your markets can respond? They see it as a threat to an opportunity when these global positions are taken and they pull out of certain insurance areas where they're providing capital protection?
In India, it will not make too much of a difference. We've seen that when the Iran sanctions came in, for example, or we've seen that with coal, where there is a large exposure from one of the Indian businesses in Australian coal, for example, and the London insurance market is shunning giving insurance cover for that. You're finding the state-owned insurers in India stepping up. So And GIC Re has now become the 10th largest reinsurer in the world, and it's growing its book on a daily basis. So I don't see that problem as far as India is concerned, but it may become.
So it's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity at our end.
Difficult subject to someone from Brazil because we had two huge accidents recently. But my perception, and it's already happening, it's clearly happening, is that the risk management of these operations is much better than before. So I think it's part of the game. You have a problem, the insurance companies, they step back and say that it may be difficult to insure your risk if you don't improve your risk management system. You improve the system and look for again the coverage. And the last alternative, the outcome, if you don't do that, is that you have to make self-insurance. So, but in Brazil, at least, global groups are involved with the mining operations too. And that two accidents were resulted from very old systems, and part of the coverage problem is related to the fact that these rejects accumulation were not operational anymore, because it's in the past. Maybe I think the more recent operations are not based on that, but I think it's a natural process. Brazil is not only very big, but very important to the mining sector, especially important to the mining sector. So the parties will find solutions to address this problem. I don't feel really definitely worried about the lack of coverage in the future. I think things will be are being solved already, with exclusions, limitations, and things being better and better in the next years.
Honestly, I don't know whether it's an opportunity or not. What I know is that environmental protection is a key thing now in China, and the liabilities will increase. Sustainable production and sustainable activities from enterprises are expected. The whole economic sustainability policy is now put into the constitution of China. Not many people know that. And this will eventually cause that companies have to readdress their production and the way they deal with extraction of natural resources. And the government will penalize and sanction those companies who eventually surpass these regulations. So they are going to be taken on by the government in this first instance. I'm not sure who eventually would then take out insurance, because at the same time the competition between companies in China is harsh, and I think often they don't value the expense. They will just or self-insure, or they will leave it and take the risk. But this is changing in general by professional companies, but not by the mid-sized companies, I think. Not for the time being.
Well, in Mexico, the environmental liability is rather new. So, and now the fines and penalties are very high. So yeah, that's an opportunity area in Mexico, and maybe the allocation of the risks most of the times would be easy or difficult depending on the reinsurance market. And so far, the London reinsurance market is always taking Mexican risks, and we haven't had problems. The biggest insurance case in Mexico came from a mining corporation, the Fertinal case that was very sounded here in London. As far as I know, the London insurance market, they were not eager to reinsure the risk coming from Fertinal, but the rest of the risks were properly transferred to the.
Thanks, Aldo. Do we have any more questions? I think that's it's been fascinating. I think we probably should break now, unless anybody has anything they'd like to ask. I think there have been a number of recurring themes throughout these excellent talks, which I've found fascinating. Government reform and the opening of markets, the uncertainty, unpredictability in relation to regulatory application experience, the lack of predictable legal environment, technology, all of it, which are issues you need local and real, genuine experience and knowledge. And I think these guys have proved that they are the people to go to, and that's why you need Global Insurance Law Connect. I hope you will stay for some drinks. One of technology, I've just seen a photograph of the food and drink, which is next door. So do please stay, do please ask more questions, more discussion. We'd welcome it, I'm sure. And can we finish off by just saying thank you very much indeed for these excellent speeches. Thank you.